everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'd first like to acknowledge the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I'm based here today in Byron Bay. With that, I'd like to start by introducing myself and the panelists. So my name's Trev. I'm one of Zepto's co-founders, and I've been voluntold, but I'm happy to be here as the MC today. And we've got Ian Lenny, who's also a co-founder of Zepto and head of technical sales. We've got Anthony Bracic, who's the head of product at Wpay. And finally, and definitely not least, Marnie Ryan from AP Plus. Thank you so much for joining us today. And really what we're here to do today is to chat about PayTo and what it will look like as the product and its use cases evolve. Our aim for today is to provide all the attendees with a forum to ask questions about the functionality of PayTo and why Wpay are investing in this new payment method. So just quickly, a bit of housekeeping. You'll see two areas on the right-hand side for you to engage with us. First is the chat, and then go ahead, use it for banter, chat, comments, use emojis freely. We love them. But for questions, you'll also see there's a specific area for questions. So jump in there and ask away. That'll help us triage and organize and make sure we don't miss anything and give it the due attention. And anything that we do miss, we promise to get back to you after the webinar. We'll also be posting a poll very shortly, and we'd love to get your participation on that poll. And there you go. And that'll also help us kind of direct the conversation as we go. So thank you, Ian. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Marnie. And to get us started, I have a bit of a thesis around payments, and in particular, it's around the act of paying. And when the act of paying for a product or service is a very distinctly human thing. And I think, through time, it's become almost kind of detached. It's been this cold thing. So let me start by asking you each, and I'll start with you, Marnie. What's the last thing you paid for, and how did you pay for it?
It was my lunch, and I am embarrassed to say that it was on a card, not maybe a credit card. It wasn't FPOS, and it was out of my Apple Wallet, which I'm sure I will be ribbed by the whole FPOS team as soon as I finish this call.
Thanks, Marnie. I'll go over to you, Anthony.
Well, funny enough, I was in our Norwest Woolly store and actually bought a couple of croissants, one for myself and a colleague, and used our Everyday Pay scan QR. So funny enough, worked out well for today's webinar.
Thank you. Over to you, Ian.
And mine was last night. I was purchasing some sprint shoes for my daughter. And I was doing some very Luddite online shopping where I actually had to get up off the couch, go get my credit card, and punch in the number into a new website of which I had not used before. And it almost made me not purchase the shoes at that point in time because it was state of origin. So I missed a try.
It sounds like there are some ways that we've utilized to pay for that product or experience that were very well suited, and others not so much. So there's definitely space for improvement there. And I'll just jump in myself. I actually just yesterday was paying one of the builders that's helping us do some renovation at our place, and he provided me with an invoice, and it was a BSB and account number. And I bemoaned the fact that it wasn't at least using Pay ID, so that I knew that I wasn't fat fingering it, and I would at least get within my banking interface, the confirmation that it's going to the right person. So as any payment nerd would do, I spent some time with him and explained to him about Pay ID and the benefits of Pay ID. But thanks a lot for sharing that. So just to kick things off, I'll start with you, Marnie. Starting with the basics, can you tell us what is PayTo? Why should we be excited about it? And in terms of what it enables for businesses and their customers?
Sure. So PayTo, and I'm not sure where the poll landed as to how many of you know exactly what PayTo is and whether you're all experts, which I'm hoping that some of you are. PayTo really is a new and sort of digital way for businesses and merchants to initiate real-time payments from customer bank accounts. When we first started looking at PayTo or what was previously known as our debit alternatives, it was even before we launched NPP. So we've been working on this since 2017. So it has been a long time coming. It is foundational to how we're actually going to be paying things in the future. And really, the view that we took at that time was it was going to replace, debit alternatives. But we didn't really have the view that we have now, which is it's going to provide, so much more than just direct debit. It's payment initiation. It provides customers with more visibility and control over their payment arrangements, all through a digital customer experience. And really, it's going to modernise the way in which we all interact with all of the payments. If you think about what it's going to do in terms of benefits for customers, so it gives you more control. It means that you can actually see your PayTo agreements within your banking channel. You can authorise them in your banking channel. You can suspend, cancel, pause those agreements. But it also means that you've got visibility. So rather than having to go, whether you're looking back through transaction history or even looking at things in your memory, basically, to go back and say, where did I make that payment, or have I still got monthly deductions coming out for that subscription that I'm not really sure about? PayTo provides you with the ability to be able to have that all in one place in your banking channel. For businesses, though, PayTo, from our perspective, is really just going to change how businesses operate, and it will actually mean that they have a smart, real-time way in which they can initiate data-rich payments to ensure that they get straight-through processing, real-time transaction reconciliation when they're receiving payments to and from customers, but also transforming that customer sort of relationship not only to individual customers and consumers, but to businesses as well. And that's, I think, is the real change step in what we've done with PayTo. And having said that, the way we sort of looked at PayTo originally has changed so much, even just in the time that we've been working on it, and the industry's been working on it. It's gone from sort of being that direct debit sort of use case now to everything from, recurring payment, subscription payments, in-app, e-commerce, payroll and corporate payments, which, for us is going to be a game changer. But also, just the e-wallets, funding, I would have been able to buy my lunch using PayTo if that, if that had been set up at that point in time. And so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thanks, Marnie. And is it fair to say, like, gone are the days where, or at least hopefully gone are the days where you sign up for a direct debit on a piece of paper and you got to transcribe your BSB and your account number, and instead have a nice streamlined digitized kind of flow, at least from a consumer perspective. And also much easier for the merchant, so that they, that there's no, like, the vectors for also like fraud are also reduced from that particular perspective.
100%. And the fear that you've got a piece of paper that's sitting, behind the desk at the gym that's now, that might be open to anyone who's got a BSB and account number access, then sure, all of that sort of comes into play. And the fact that there's control and security within your banking channel. So that's a trusted source in which you can authorize those agreements, and that you can view them as well. So the layer of security is, obviously banking grade security.
Excellent. Thanks, Marnie. I'll go to you next, Anthony. If you could firstly tell us, or can you give us an overview of Wpay and your payments ecosystem?
Well, Wpay really is a proven payments platform designed for retailers. It was originally developed for the Woolworths Group, but Wpay is now available for merchants across Australia and New Zealand. Really, it's our understanding and how customers connect through payment experience at scale, and our focus on developing positive payment experiences to help merchants to grow their business and move just beyond payments. It's comprehensive. It's a comprehensive merchant platform that can be tailored and will continually evolve to meet clients' changing needs and help deliver powerful customer experiences. We currently partner to provide our platform to some of Australia's and New Zealand's largest retailers: Woolies, Big W, Dan Murphy's, BWS, and Countdown. The name is the list goes on. And probably one of the key things that most people don't realise is that we're the largest non-bank processor in Australia.
Wow, that's really interesting. Actually, I personally was not aware of that was so large. And we'd all be mostly familiar with the adoption curve. And in the adoption curve, especially near the beginning, you have these innovators, early adopters, and what we tend to see is that those are like the smaller businesses, the startups. And it seems that with Wpay really kind of bucking that trend. So in that case, fair to say that Wpay is an early adopter of PayTo, particularly in the retail space. What is it about PayTo from a features perspective that drew Wpay to implement PayTo as a payment mechanism in your platform?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that at Wpay, we're always looking to continue to evolve our payment solutions and provide customers choice to help them make their lives easier. So I think that's the primary focus for us, is always about being customer first. I think we're just naturally seeing in the market an increased appetite from customers for real-time payments because they offer immediate processing and settlement of transactions and security. As Marnie mentioned before, there's an array of use cases that this will bring to market, just better ways of making payment compared to traditional payments. So it's really about offering that greater convenience for customers, speed, when you're comparing that to existing payment methods, and overall we're always looking to innovate our payment solutions.
I love how customer consumer centric your thinking is there. Ultimately it's about really kind of reducing that friction when it comes to paying, acquiring a product or a service. And I love that you're really kind of meeting the customers and consumers where they are. And yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Anthony.
Yeah, I was just to say, once again, it's born into the fact that we were born out of a retailer group. Customer first is really about what we are, and offering, as I said before, payment solutions that make customers' life easier and convenience.
And I love that because it really supports my thesis around payments being like a distinctly human thing. So very from a selfish perspective. Lenny or Ian, as a co-founder of Zepto, you're part of the team that helped decide early on that at Zepto we would introduce the PayTo functionality through the connected institution path. Can you talk us through how that decision was made and what it actually means for Zepto today and moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much part of our DNA, and it stems from our early experiences when we entered the payment world. Because if you didn't know much about Zepto, none of the founding group had any payment experience at all. So we started from absolute scratch, which involved getting our first direct debit facility with a local bank in our local area, where we had a $90,000 security to be able to process $30,000. So we thought that was amazing, and if we ever breached our limit, we were killing it. But we progressed from there, and every step along the way, as we advanced through getting more and more access and deeper down the banking rails and closer to where the money is truly moving, which in that case was BEX, we found that we were getting we found two things. One is that we got incremental improvement in knowledge and then taking that knowledge and applying it to our application and delivering that newfound knowledge to our customers. Those incremental improvements at scale for our customers had considerable uplift to the ability of how they manage their customers and ran their business. So it really taught us early on that the closer we can get to the source of the movement of money, and where we're unencumbered by anybody else's rules or how they deliver their application, gave us a license to really focus on how we deliver our capabilities to our customers and innovate. And so that is the second thing that we learned along the way and is part of our DNA is that having that direct access, or as close to direct access as possible, allows us to be the masters of our own destiny and how we deliver our product and our payment capabilities to our merchants. And in the case of CI, you could not get closer to being able to move money around. And we get unfettered access to data and information of how a payment is processed through the network from end to end. We are able to take that information and then apply all that logic to our application and continue to deliver incremental changes and uplifts to our application, which then can translate to considerable uplift for our merchants. Without getting into, and I'll stop short of being technical because I'm not that technical, but from what I'm seeing in the buddy testing that we're doing and the information that we're getting through is that it's probably the best decision we made. And in terms of such a game-changing payment introduction to the country, what we don't know right now, but I can assure you that being a CI is going to give us first insight and first ability to change, react, and move and deliver the best-in-class capabilities. So yeah, it just comes from our DNA of constantly being shown that as you get closer and closer to the rails, you can deliver a better product to your customers.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And you mentioned before, you said as a CI, assuming that you're referring to as a connected institution.
Connected institution, yeah.
We tend to talk in acronyms behind closed doors, as I'm sure everybody in this room is aware of.
And for everybody in the room, connected institution means that we have the ability to create mandates directly with the NPP, as well as initiate payments directly with the NPP with no intermediary between us and the NPP.
And I would say the team has worked, the Zepto team and the Wpay team, having sort of been across some of the implementation work that you've been doing, you've worked incredibly hard to get to this point. So it isn't an easy journey. I will acknowledge that, and that you guys have.
Hair before we did this.
So yeah, it is a lot of effort for you guys, and we want to acknowledge that we've seen, that delivered back in spades for us and for the industry.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been great, right? It's been great working with the likes of the team at AP Plus, and then likewise, it's been great partnering with people such as Anthony at Wpay, and it's just been such a collaborative type of endeavor, and it's just made it enjoyable along the way. So yeah, thank you, Anthony. What was it about Zepto that made Wpay select them or select us as your partner of choice for Zepto?
Well, essentially, there's a number of players now, as you can see, that PayTo is slowly growing in force in terms of the offering that's ahead of us. But we looked at a few providers offering PayTo services, and we were impressed with Zepto's readiness, flexibility, and partnership mindset, really. We share a mutual interest and a similar cultural fit, and view on value of forming long-standing partnership and a relationship. Both have similar views on agility and collaboration and providing choices for merchants and customers. So it was really that alignment of the way of thinking and just the way both parties came to the table and the people themselves were really aligned. We collectively share a commitment to delivering these enhanced customer payment experiences. I know we talk about it, and sometimes some people might be blasé, but it is really about the customer. And bringing these experiences, real-time experiences for digital account-to-account payment solutions at scale. We are a very large group. We serve millions of customers every day within the Wpay network and ecosystem, and so it's really important to find the right partner. I think the other key thing is, as Ian talked about just then before, I think with Zepto's direct connection to the MPP rails, Zepto for us was the obvious choice when looking for a PayTo partner.
Yeah. And just adding to that, in terms of direct connection and how we look at partnership, is that we don't strive to be the master of many payment methods. In fact, we are, I was talking to a colleague today, and she was commenting how there's about 20 people in our company that live, eat, breathe everything PayTo, knowing every single code. We want to be the absolute specialist in PayTo. and deliver that specialty to our merchants, and therefore hopefully that translates through to the customer experience on the other end as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Ian. And in that vein, PayTo is still very early. And an expression that I quite like is that Noah didn't build the ark whilst it was raining. And really, what we're doing here and looking at Wpay and this partnership is that we're looking at, we feel like we understand deeply the customer, the consumers, the problem, and like PayID is a perfect example of how it took a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, to get to, I guess, really mainstream. Marnie, what's your thoughts around like PayTo adoption? What does the volume look like now? When do we expect it to ramp, and what will really drive this?
Yeah, look, I think I agree. These things are transformational. So, with PayID, that was a complete step change for us to have an addressing service in payments across the industry. And PayTo is even bigger than that. It's, when we first started looking at it, we sort of said, no, it's just sort of a small piece of work. I think everyone across the industry has acknowledged now that it was as big, if not bigger, than what we needed to do to implement NPP because of the way in which we've implemented it. And I think just working through and, the comments before just around how getting close to what it looks like and seeing what's happening in the industry at the moment and the early insights. I think we're still going through that sort of teething and those early insights at the moment. So volumes aren't, huge, but we are sort of, starting to see that ramp up quite significantly as we've seen the other majors or the remaining majors come on board. We're still on track to see the majority of retail accounts available for PayTo by the middle of this year. And yes, it is very close to the middle of this year. So, we are really excited to see what it's looking like out there. And, the interactions that many customers will have with their banking channels and seeing PayTo appear in those banking channels will actually drive some of the adoption. The other piece that we're really looking forward to is our own consumer education campaign. So we are kicking that off very soon. You will see PayTo out in the wild. There will be, different pieces that will pop up on socials and other areas where PayTo will now be really driven from a customer perspective. Many merchants will be asked about it. And we're actually seeing that take up, and even just from the poll, I think there was about 85% that have got a little bit of knowledge about PayTo. I think that will change because it is actually above the line. We are going to go mainstream with this. And so the questions will be there. What is PayTo and how do I get to access it? And why are you making me sign a piece of paper when I can give you, my PayID and you can generate a PayTo agreement from that?
Excellent. I'm really excited to start seeing that because I think there's just tremendous uplift to that, as we're discussing today. Sorry, Ian.
I was just going to comment on adoption. Like I'd place bets that the adoption curve will be steeper than NPP payouts and PayID usage, just because from what Anthony has already mentioned, that there's a consumer demand for real-time payments. People like doing it. They love the satisfaction of knowing that when they've paid someone or when they've executed a payment, that it's actually happened. So I'd place a bet. I'll bet you guys. And if only we had a company that was flying a flag that had 14-something million users that was rolling it out, that would be amazing too.
Don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That's a perfect segue, actually, Ian. Like you're in the thick of it, right? You're there daily talking to customers and prospects about PayTo. And now that we're starting to talk about the application of PayTo, what are some of the use cases that excites you the most?
Well, any use case that people will be using PayTo excites me. So the stock standard of any membership platform where they have a repeat buyer. It's a great use case for that. So they can really build a seamless customer checkout experience, and that can go for bill payments as well, to provide in-app payment capability directly from their bank account. Subscriptions, e-commerce, particularly around the high ATV and marketplaces that have high average transaction value, where potentially credit cards just really bite that merchant and also present a significant fraud and chargeback risk. But the ones that I'm actually excited about, they're not super sexy, but they're the B2B environment. I think the B2B environment is the biggest untapped area of digital payments, and it's a huge TAM. There's going to be tremendous uplift in cash flow efficiency for businesses trading with each other, and how it's applied is going to be through a multitude of applications that already connect these businesses, but that at the end of the day, they're sending paper invoices to each other or waiting for bank transfers or having a team of reconciliation experts going through bank accounts. So I see the B2B uplift really as an exciting area. And then you have the fintechs. So that is the exciting place where they start building out completely new things that none of us have thought of. And anecdotally, the way we saw Pay ID deployed in the market I dare say probably wasn't envisioned by the creators of Pay ID. Being able to attach it to your Ladbrokes account or something like that to make instant payments. But it's worked really well. It's really educated the populace on real-time payment capabilities, and we will probably see similar stuff coming out of PayTo. I had a fantastic meeting with a company the other day that was looking to utilize PayTo to prevent you're on an online shopping, you go to buy something and it's out of stock. But what they'll do in the back end is they'll find somebody else who has it in stock, so you can stay and pay with your favorite retailer. And in the back end, all the money is moved in real time between the two parties so that can be shipped on behalf of the retailer. And I thought that was a great use case of using the speed and accessibility of PayTo to facilitate a consumer-based transaction.
Thanks, Ian. Whilst you were talking, I also started seeing a lot of questions come through. So I might just throw a question to you, Anthony, and then look at and pull out a couple of the questions from the attendees. Cool. Because quite closely related to what kind of Ian was saying is, it's more about like the applicability and how PayTo will be utilized. How will PayTo sit in the Wpay payment ecosystem? And do you see it replacing other payment methods, or will it be complementary?
Well, we see PayTo complementing our existing payment offering. As we said, as we all discussed, and I said, it's about offering customer choice. Credit cards, gift cards, digital wallets, PayTo, they're all a part of the ecosystem. It's unlikely that one will prevail over the other, but one will probably get stronger over the others. And for us, it's really about having maximum choice, convenient for customers to be able to make payments the way they want to make those payments securely. We're always seeking to add new payment offerings to our customers. But more importantly, as long as they are meeting customer needs for those payment experiences. As Ian said, it's not just about B2C; it's also B2B. With Wpay, we've got different use cases across the organisation, and as a result, we need to be at the forefront of trying to offer that maximum convenience for those customers. And so for us, it's just about adding and complementing to what we already provide our merchants and our customers. So B2B is also a key area for us to move forward. So it's just really onwards and upwards in offering these new ways of making real-time payments.
Thanks, Anthony. And one of the questions that we actually had was somewhat related to that. So what will a consumer have to activate in order to take advantage of PayTo within, say, the Wpay offering?
Well, we're working with our merchants right now. As I said, we've got a ton of use cases, be it B2C, B2B, etc. There will be a time where, for example, it might be a subscription. It could be just standard grocery payments. Could be standard single one-time purchases. That the simplicity of creating a payment agreement that could be single purchase or long-lived through that checkout process that will avail that opportunity. So for us, it's just extending that capability, but really making it as simple and as seamless as possible to the consumer.
I love it. I love it. And one of the topics that I'm seeing also come through here in the questions that might be better suited for you, Marnie, is if there are any issues or challenges with the B2B payments using PayTo. So both from an experience level and also technical limitations. And we got, slightly related question around like the activation of, those business accounts supporting PayTo, if we have any insight on that.
Yeah, sure. And I think, when, as I sort of mentioned before, this is a many-year program that we've been working on. And when we kicked off the actual delivery of the program, we acknowledged across the industry that there would be service variability. And what we sort of see as that service variability is, the high hit areas for where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck and where the institutions have, the greatest customer base, were always going to be those first pieces that we implemented. So for us, that was the retail space, and we acknowledged that quite early on. Some of the corporate accounts are sort of the second or day two implementations for some of the institutions, and we acknowledge that. We make that sort of really clear out to those initiators or the payment initiators who are part of the ecosystem, that they're aware of what offerings they can sort of interact with customers. But having said that, there are opportunities across different institutions as to how they actually make those accounts available. There are, different things that we work with each of the institutions to ensure that, initiators like Wpay, Zepto, and all of the others can actually find a workaround. And maybe it's whether there's, a different way in which they can authorize it, or there's other pieces that we can feed into that knowledge base across the industry to help support corporate accounts or B2B accounts.
And with that, thank you. And without going too deep into the technical realm of things, I'm assuming one of the issues there, especially around business accounts, is the multi-signatory issue, where when you agreement, you need multiple people to agree to that. Is there anything you can touch on that, or is that still quite a higher level at the moment?
I think at the moment it's a bit higher level still, but there are, we're working with institutions to make sure that that's part of their next key delivery pieces, and a lot of that is in line with some of their corporate account activations. So as part of that process, you need to ensure that there is, that multi-structured approval, and where there's many to sign, that's probably where there's the challenge. So where there's an approval layer, or there's more than one to sign, that's where there's sort of been consistently a challenge across some of the institutions. However, we know that they've got solutions, and they are on track and looking to implement them quite soon, because we actually know, and even to Ian's point, that B2B market, we're pushing it. We're wanting that to be one of the key use cases for us, just not only for PayTo, but all of the other work that we've been doing behind the scenes. Procure to pay is really one of the key things that we're looking at from a digital, even a digital strategy across the whole economy. Combining that with e-invoicing and a whole heap of other things means that we're leveraging, multiple systems, but ultimately you giving cash to merchants and to businesses faster than what they've ever seen before. And that's what we want to make sure that we're part of.
And you got to balance that out with the safety and security of the broader network, which
Exactly.
is a daunting task. Can totally appreciate that. So just broadly, PayTo over the next 12, 24, 36 months, looking far into the future, what do you imagine? Like, how do you think it'll be used?
We see, and we see sort of the hockey stick effect with the uplift of where we sort of see volumes going, and that's where most of the people that we interact with are saying, yes, it's going to be enormous. I think it's the key driver for us to move volume across from BECS and direct entry. Ultimately, the consultations that are out there say that BECS is ultimately going to be retired, and for us, we see PayTo as being the final, cog in our making sure that the NPP actually covers all of those use cases that are existing out there. So we see the volumes for not only for PayTo, for NPP increasing, and it will just become part of our regular day-to-day interactions, the expectation will be that everything is real time. We see that fundamentally shifting. There will no longer be this view that something's going to take a couple of days to land in your bank account. And I think consumer expectations and business expectations are almost already there, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember when quite some time ago when we first started thinking about the idea that is now Zepto, we were kind of questioning like why can't these payments just be as simple as a text message and as instant, right? And I love that it's going in that direction. Ian, what industry verticals do you think will be first to drive PayTo adoption?
Yeah, I mean, the verticals will be, the early adopters are always certain types of verticals. I mean, you can say the gaming vertical, financial services, particularly, I think will be an early adopter just due to the fact that they have no margin to accept high value transactions via any form of payment other than account to account, and that the speed of accepting and placing orders and reconciling orders is critical to their customer satisfaction. So anywhere where speed of payment, where credit cards does not suit the model, is going to be an early adopter vertical. But I have high hopes for subscription, and anywhere that there's a high ATV. So e-commerce where there's a high ATV, I actually think is ripe for some early integration. And the high ATV is probably anything over $250. Or maybe even a little bit less. There's a considerable uplift to the merchant's back pocket, I guess, as well as delivering just a great ongoing customer experience. So those are the types of verticals I think are going to go.
And off the back of that, I mean, I'm a very optimistic person, but what would be the cost of not embracing PayTo? What could be, specifically in those verticals that you mentioned?
Oh, definitely. The cost in those specific early adopting verticals are get left behind. When people want to, you saw this early in the crypto markets in terms of and that's a huge customer base where people would move to different exchanges dependent on whether or not they offered real-time payments in the early days, because the volatility of the assets that they were buying was critical to getting money in so they could get it at a certain point in time. And so basically, when it comes down to the speed of executing what the customer wants, if they're not offering that real-time capability, then they will probably get left behind for another provider.
And I suppose that goes into Anthony's point earlier, right? Providing optionality to the customers. The customers ultimately, they want that convenience, right? If it's not there, is there somebody else that has it? So that I can get that level of convenience. And ultimately, as we're seeing payments, the friction level of payments trending pretty rapidly now due to the great work of AP Plus and the NPP really, making these transactions just flow through nicely. One thing that we haven't touched on, and just a quick topic, is really, I think it's worth pointing out as well, is that since PayTo is operating on the NPP rails, we also have this rich data component, which allows for much more kind of streamlined kind of business flows when it comes to payments. I don't know if Marnie, you'd like to touch on that when we're thinking about the design of PayTo and NPP.
Yeah, and I think, overall NPP fundamentally was designed on the ISO 20022 message. So it gives us a lot more ability to structure particular types of payments and a particular, focus for us over the last couple of years, not sort of aligned to PayTo, but what will be leveraged as part of PayTo are specific payments that sit in, the superannuation, the payroll, the tax, and tax categories, and actually identifying those types of payments and adding richer data that allows for, streamlined processing. And, if you think about what the government's just announced with Payday Super, being able to make, those sort of payments on their payday with an alignment to be able to be processed by those super funds, that type of capability that we already have sitting in NPP enables that really quickly. So we've been thinking about this for a long time and all of those business types payments. And look, we've still got work to do. We know that there's different areas that we want to make sure that we're capturing extra information. And that's probably part of what we're we're looking at, and further to my point before about the e-invoicing and the implementation of the PEPOL sort of e-invoice framework for Australia and New Zealand, we're really looking forward to making sure that and the payments associated with those e-invoices are seamless and instantaneous.
Sounds great to me. And in relation to PayID and PayTo, at the moment, that solution is currently limited to Australian domestic banks. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Look, there is talk with other international real-time payment systems, and coming out, I think, of one of the meetings at the G20, there was a commitment to actually undertake some work and looking at how we actually link up international real-time payment systems around the globe, and we're actively looking at that and making that part of a future plan and roadmap for us. And yeah, if PayID is available worldwide, I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah, I think so would we. That'd be fantastic. So I might just, realizing there's only a couple of minutes left, I just wanted to know two things. Well, one, I'd like to go into a quick rapid fire question with each of you, but also for all the attendees, we've been inundated with questions, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to get through all of them. But if any of the attendees want to stay past a 1:15, Ian and I will stick around and are happy to take some of those questions. But in terms of rapid fire questions, and we'll start with you, Anthony, because you obviously have, you've got tons of data. You're working with a lot of different payment systems. Thinking out loud, is there one PayTo use case that you think will surprise us all? And Marnie and Ian, that's the same question for you guys. So you guys just get a little bit more time to think about it.
Well, I don't know about surprise. I think it's just about understanding all the use cases. Because right now, for example, in our B2B, we've got marketplaces. So we can, as we talked about, Ian talked about intermediaries. There's two sides of the coin. There's the acceptance of money in, but also settling of funds out. So right now, we as an acquirer from a payments perspective are using both sides of the fence. So not only just acceptance of or drawing money from a customer through those rails, but also settling of funds in that same manner where we're the conduit to send it to. And that whole end-to-end journey is about from the customer interacting with our merchants, but also settling to sellers, for example, in marketplaces or B2B channels. So therefore, the way I look at it is we've got so many use cases. How can we address each one? And as Marnie said, where are the low-hanging fruit that we can start attacking and start driving adoption? And because the intent is for it to become ubiquitous. So that basically, just like PayID, it becomes just a normal part of the vernacular. People are starting to use it, be it in-app, on web, and as a part of the settlement process, because even that is really important to us from a Wpay perspective. There's the customer element, but there's also really the merchant element, and so therefore, and we play both parts, Wpay in our ecosystem, so it's really important. So in my mind, yes, is there one that will kill the others? Not really. I like Ian. I think they're all valid use cases. We all have to be hungry to look at each one of those because it's about increasing adoption and getting it out there in the public's hands.
Thanks, Anthony. I might throw to you, Ian.
Yeah, a specific use case which I've kind of dreamt up is, I don't know if it's going to happen, is potentially a hybrid environment for a while where you combine PayTo to support or create a non-bank issued debit card that you could then layer on extra reward points. So you could connect multiple bank accounts to a card, which you could then load in your Apple Wallet. So you're effectively and get more points. A lot of people probably scratching their head, say, why don't you just use your bank card? I don't know. But it's a use case which could be created and delivered and has probably some real value to some people out there. But it would be a hybrid system of connecting multiple of your bank accounts to a single card, of which does the logic in the background to make sure you could purchase things as you go along.
Thanks, Ian. Over to you, Marnie.
Spitballing.
That's good. I like it.
Look, To be honest, I hope that there's use cases that we sort of haven't thought about yet. That would be that for me, I hope that we've built the system and I'm fairly confident, touch wood, that we have to cater for use cases that we haven't even thought of. But one that I think will surprise people, because I think it's challenging at the moment, is in the corporate space, we've sort of had so many subscription, offerings that come into, to all businesses now. So Trev, you've probably got 5 credit cards that are maxed out because you've got subscriptions on different, meeting places or, IT or technology things, or you've got Jira or something like that you're now paying for, all on credit cards. I just think how that transforms and changes to be able to have, your finance team sitting there ticking off all your subscriptions and not chasing people for their credit card statements to be completed and approved. Life-changing.
I think there are a lot of people at Zepto in the finance team that would love that as well.
Yeah, I know.
The fintech space, PayTo is just fertile ground for the fintechs. There's going to be a lot of stuff jumped up, exactly like you said, Marnie, that we haven't thought of yet. We don't know what we don't know, and we will continue to be surprised for years, but it's all going to be at the benefit of ultimately the consumer and the merchant.
With that, I realize that we're over time, so I'll start by thanking you, Marnie, Anthony, and Ian. Please feel free to, you can stay with us, and we'll rip through a couple of questions, or also want to be respectful of time. So if you do leave, thank you very much for jumping on board and having a chat with us.
Thank you. I'll stay on for a little while, but I just wanted to say congratulations to both the Zepto team and the Wpay team. It's been a significant amount of work, as I said before, and well done. We can't wait to see the growth.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll just stay for a little longer, Trevor. But
okay.
Once again, just to everyone else, great working with Zepto and AP Plus and onwards and moving forward.
Great, thank you. So let's start for one question here that's got a couple of votes. So what level of compliance is expected required for PayTo payments and its data? Does it have higher data protection requirements like PCI, or the same as existing bank account direct debit data?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure, go for it. Yeah, or else I was going to throw it to Ian.
The governance does come out of it.
To answer if you want. Look, yes, there's a whole security layer, and NPP is built on a number of factors that we need to, rely on because of the banks actually implementing our payment infrastructure. So we have a whole compliance framework under which we operate. And included in that is also obligations around PayTo user onboarding and the associated obligations, whether that's, KYC or security, but also, controls and monitoring that are in place to make sure that there is an extra layer that doesn't necessarily exist in some of the direct debit market.
Thanks, Marnie. And a really rapid fire question, I'll just get you to answer this one, Ian. Is it possible to have a PayTo agreement that requires debtor approval for each payment?
Yes.
Trick question.
A debtor, a PayTo agreement with what?
That requires the debtor or the payer to approve each payment.
Oh, no, you don't need to. You can create an open agreement allowing an ongoing connection so payments can just happen from in-app.
And if you did want the payer to approve every single time, it would be issuing an agreement, because that's how they approve. So really,
agreements can be very flexibly created in terms of they can be a one-off agreement that are very specific. So it can be down to the cent of which a transaction can be created with the itemized detail of what it's for, who it's to, and where it goes. That's one way of creating agreement, and that would require an approval every single time. But you can also create pretty flexible agreements in how you want to engage with your customers. So a single agreement to cover subscription payments. And it can have limitations in it of the frequency of the subscription and the amount of the subscription. Or you can pull it back a little bit if you have a very flexible but trusting relationship with your client, where you can say, we have the ability to debit you at ad hoc or at any frequency. But only up to a certain limit of $5,000 every 30 days or something like that. So the agreements can be structured to meet the business requirements of the application. It's very flexible, but at the same time, providing an incredible amount of control for both the consumer and the merchant.
And another question I have here is about, which is the safer form of payment? So very kind of absolute question here. Basically, do we suggest that PayTo is safer form of payment over credit debit card payments? If so, what's the rationale? Especially when it comes to consumer protection and fraud. Consumers have better protection when using credit debit card.
Who wants to take that?
Well, I'm happy to take it a little bit. If like a component of this is that like fundamentally they're two different things, right? So looking at credit cards in particular, you've got a PAN, right? With that's the number that you have, and there's a lot of more protection around that. But a lot of the protection that's built around it is because of the vulnerability of that technology in particular. And I don't mean to say, and I don't mean that ill towards credit cards. I think there's definitely a place for it. I use my credit card every day. But they're fundamentally different. And for example, like if your credit card number and CCV or CSV gets leaked, somebody can technically use it. Whereas when you're looking at it PayTo, it's more the fraud vector there would be more of a social engineering fraud, where somebody would have to know your BSBN account number or pay ID, put it into your agreement field, have access to your online banking portal, accept the agreement. And that's totally possible, right? And that's where the social engineering comes into play. But there's definitely different areas there, and the consumer protection that exists both for like bank account to bank account transfers and credit card transfers are based on the fundamentals of how that technology works.
Yeah. So the goods and service disputes, which don't really apply to PayTo, you have that on credit cards, but someone's paying for it. And so really in terms of a goods and service disputes, that happens a lot where people are just unhappy with a product, should be dealt, between the two parties. But yeah, there are 100% differences. I think I let Trev's answer about the actual security of the mechanism it's much more secure. When it comes down to consumer habits and that type of consumer protection, yeah, there's probably a fintech that'll come out and deliver a beautiful solution for that as well.
Thank you. I might grab one last question and then we can call it there for the day. This may be a question for you, Marnie. How did the Swift banking system or the Swift network adopt this new way of settlement?
For NPP?
Yeah.
We as an industry actually approached Swift to build the NPP based on the ISO 20022 standard, the messages. But it was an industry initiative that all at the time it was 12 participants. We approached Swift as the vendor. We sent out the whole sort of process of RFI and etc. And yes, Swift were the vendor that we selected to help build us the infrastructure as it exists now, and the RBA then built the fast settlement service, which is a component of the RBA RITS infrastructure. And so that fast settlement service, which is unique around the world, we are one of the only real-time payment systems that does line-by-line real-time settlement at a central bank. That infrastructure was actually built and obviously sort of in collaboration with the rest of the industry.
And before we drop off, Marnie, where do you think our system ranks globally?
I'm biased, but look, I think there's a couple of ratings that sort of exist out there that have got 5 key criteria that exist, and that is having an addressing service, having a real-time line-by-line settlement, having rich data, having request to pay or PayTo in this instance, and payment initiation. I think the one thing that we're about a 4.9 out of 5, I would say, and there's just a couple of things, and making sure that PayTo went live, and then an API infrastructure. So we've published some APIs that are out in market. It's then about is that a move to having it more open source, etc., and payment initiation. So with the work being done by Treasury and payment initiation, we think that PayTo solves for that. So I think we're almost a 5. So yeah, maybe connecting real-time systems around the world would give us a 5.5.
All eyes on us globally.
Yeah.
Well, I'll thank you very much. I know Anthony's left, but thanks to him as well. Thank you, Marnie. Thanks, Ian, and thanks for everybody for attending. Really appreciate all the questions, and for the questions that we haven't managed to answer, we'll get back to you definitely, because we're keen to make sure that that we've got a high level of transparency. Everybody understands what's happening. This has been so much work leading up to this point. We've talked about it. Now it's time to actually kind of put all this stuff into action. So once again, thanks, Marnie. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Anthony. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, Rev. Thank you. See you.
Bye.